All right, everyone. Welcome to the International Society of Cannabis Pharmacists, the State of Cannabis series. We are looking at Maryland today, and we've got Krissy Bernazani. I got to say it more love when I say it. All right, love, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, Melanie. What a great time to be able to present coming off of the heels of the conference over the weekend. I hope those of you who are attending tonight had the opportunity to be with us over the weekend for the conference. I can't even begin to give enough kudos to Melanie and everyone who participated and made that happen, because it was truly an exceptional conference. And if you've attended other conferences, I'm sure you know what I mean. So I'm honored to be able to be a part of this group, and also to tell you what I know and what my experiences have been operating in the state of Maryland. A little bit about me. I am a PCPS graduate, 1992, RPH, and my experience since 1992 has been primarily retail, a few stints with hospice, a little bit with a fertility clinic, worked grocery store, managed care, CVS, and ended my retail career in retail pharmacy. And I really had it probably as good as a retail pharmacist could have it. And for those of you who have worked retail or continue to work retail know what I mean. Then I had the very fortunate encounter with someone who was getting into the industry, and he was looking for a pharmacist to use on his application. And this is something that's certainly not unusual if any of you have been involved in the application process. These guys like to use, and gals, like to use a pharmacist on their application, even if it's not required, because it gets them some brownie points. So I was sort of picked up as a little bit of a brownie point type thing, but fortunately, we won the license. We won cultivation and dispensing in Maryland, and very, very quickly expanded. We partnered with Verano, which is out in Illinois. Chicago, Illinois is where Verano is corporate. So if any of you are from other states where Verano is present, you may be familiar. We are in several states. So I've been fortunate that not only did they want me for the application, but they actually wanted to keep me on board. And many of my colleagues did not have such a fortunate experience in Maryland. So I have been with the company since 2016 and had the opportunity to be involved with the cultivation and getting the cultivation operational, up and running, writing SOPs, and being involved in the inspection process. And then, of course, we did that with our first dispensary location, which opened in December of 2017. At this point in Maryland, we have 4 ZenLeaf locations. That's the max we're allowed to have in Maryland. But we are rapidly expanding into other states. So keep an eye out for a ZenLeaf near you. And I also consult for one other dispensary in the state of Maryland. So at this point, I'm overseeing a total of 5. So needless to say, it keeps me very busy. This is my full-time job. As I mentioned, our parent company is Verano Holdings. We have locations in the states that are listed there. Pennsylvania is not listed, but we are going to be opening in Pennsylvania, to the best of my knowledge, apparently very soon. I will find out more details as they happen, but as you can see, we're a multi-state operator that has a fairly large presence. If any of you follow industry news, Verano was to be acquired by Harvest. I believe that was announced not this past March, but the March before, and many, many things happened. Eventually, the deal was called off. So we did not merge with Harvest, but who knows what the future will bring. So these are the topics we'll talk about in Maryland. First of all, the patient certification process, really not that difficult for Maryland. Maryland does require the 2 steps where you register with the state, which is a $50 fee. and then you have a certification with your provider. Right now, the registration with the state of Maryland is about a 3-week turnaround unless you're hospice. Hospice patients are processed immediately. Otherwise, patients can expect about a 3-week turnaround to get their ID number, at which point they go to see a certifying provider. Registrations are good for 3 years with the state, but certifications valid for only 1 year. And Maryland does have the certification expiration of 120 days, just like a prescription would if it's not used within that time frame. A little bit more about Maryland as far as our limitations. We go on a rolling 30-day period, and the allotment is 120 grams of flower, 36 grams THC equivalent. For the most part, that seems to satisfy most patient needs, and most providers will just default to the 120/36. However, some providers will do significantly lower. Some will do significantly higher based on the patient. They do have to justify the necessity if they do opt for a higher allotment. But I have seen some pretty high allotments as far as a monthly basis. Maryland does not offer any reciprocity or allow home grows. So the state of Maryland, you have to be a Maryland resident. If your identification does not have a Maryland address on, you can, like let's say you're in Maryland, but you're renting, your license still says Virginia. If you provide 2 forms of documentation to verify a Maryland address, they will allow you to get a card. We do have very strict advertising rules in Maryland, which I suspect most states have. It's been really challenging to navigate everything from, locally here in Maryland as far as print ads, billboards, things of that nature. And then of course, social media is always challenging. The maximum licenses allowed in the state of Maryland, 1 cultivation license, 1 processor license, and you can have up to 4 dispensaries. So I know in some states, once you win a license, you become vertical. You'll have a grow, you'll have a process, and then you dispense your own products. But Maryland, you had to apply for them all separately. So we won our dispensary license and we wanted a cultivation license. We did not get processing, but we've been able to partner with a processor and basically white label. So we essentially have a vertical operation here in Maryland. For the qualifying conditions, I think they're pretty standard, 1 through 4 here. I don't think there's anything really unusual there. We do have PTSD and chronic pain on our qualifying conditions list, which I know has been a fight for some states. So these, I call them sort of the usual suspects. However, number 5 really helps to make things very easy for patients in Maryland. We call this our catch-all. Basically, it's any condition that's severe, other treatments have been ineffective, and if the provider feels the symptoms can reasonably be expected to be relieved by the use of medical cannabis. So this covers everything else, and I believe it is our number 1 qualifying condition in the state of Maryland, other. I honestly cannot think of a single person who's been denied a card here in Maryland, so that catch-all really does indeed catch just about everybody. It is not hard to get a card here in Maryland. This sign here was just up the street from my house, and this particular group really canvasses the area, and they'll just put signs out everywhere. And in fact, one day I arrived at our dispensary, and not only had they put signs all over our grass, they put business cards and postcards all over our front doors and our windowsills. I guess they got there before we opened. And we immediately had to throw them all away because the commission would definitely frown upon that, because we are not allowed to recommend a certain provider. So you know, you get some groups that are a little aggressive. We don't have any mandatory training. We don't have mandatory training for doctors or pharmacists or any other clinical directors at this point. I'll get into some specifics in a few slides. But our patient care advisor training, everything is really up to the company. So that has created a little bit of a, I guess, kind of a hole, because everybody's sort of trying to train based on maybe the company that they're familiar with as far as offering training. And not everybody has someone like a pharmacist or other clinical director who can provide that training. So bottom line is it is all across the board and all over the place. And it's really unfortunate. There is suggested training, but nothing is mandatory as of now. It looks like I do have a number on here as far as our number of certifying providers. As of 7/6, it was 1,901 certifying providers in our state. As far as who's allowed to be a certifying provider, physicians, dentists, nurse practitioners, and nurse midwives, podiatrists. I do believe physicians' assistants are going to have authority when some new regulations go into effect. Okay, sorry about that. As far as our available products, there's really the only product line that we don't have are edibles. So Maryland had no issues with flower, but they have a lot of hesitation with edibles. And understandably so. I suspect some of you are familiar with a study that came out that looked at consistency of THC content throughout edibles. And Dr. Ryan Vandre was one of the authors. He's here within the state of Maryland, at the University of Maryland, one of our very esteemed colleagues who worked on this study. And Maryland took it very seriously because they found that the consistency of THC throughout an edible product was just incredibly unreliable. And I'm sure as pharmacists, you can all appreciate that. So Maryland put the brakes on edibles, and it's been 3 years and we still don't have them, even though we've been promised that they were going to be allowed soon. We do have some things that skirt or kind of walk the line, fine line, as far as being an edible, such as gummies. We are allowed to have gummies. We just can't call them gummies. We call them chewable lozenges, soft chew lozenges. And our company, we really wanted to get the Verano edibles gummies into Maryland. Without an edible regulation, we had to get creative. So we decided to call our gummies troches. And so Verano troches in Maryland are kind of a big hit. We were the first to market with a gummy product, and maybe took a little bit of liberties with the definition of a troche, but it worked. They are incredibly popular. They're microdosed. So really fortunate that we have those particular gummies. It seems like the other gummies that we have are much higher dosing. I think the highest one that we have in a gummy might be 39 or 40 milligrams. So no restrictions on the milligrams per dose. We do have chewable tablets, and we do have some Dixie products. We have some Dixie elixirs, which look like just a beverage that you would drink the whole thing, but you only drink a capful or a tablespoonful. Prices. So Maryland, we were really expensive for quite a long time. It's starting to get better. We're nowhere near Colorado prices. We just don't have that type of supply. And I can tell you that compliance in Maryland is incredibly expensive. So our prices are going to be in the range anywhere from about $35 for sale eighth to maybe about $65 for our top shelf. Cookies right now are kind of a hot item here in Maryland, if you guys are familiar with the cookie strains. So those tend to fetch the biggest dollar. We dispense mostly in packaged products. There were deli style dispensaries for a while, but with COVID, they don't allow the deli style anymore. So for the most part, we have eighths for the flower. Sometimes we'll have bigger packaging, and of course we'll get the bulk product and break it down ourselves, you know, for the better pricing. And in those cases, we'll see, you know, sometimes we'll pack quarters, but usually in our company, that's the most that we'll package is a quarter. I do have a link in here to a typical Zen Leaf menu. I don't think it's really necessary that we go to it, but if you ever, you know, if you want to look back and check it out, please feel free. This slide, unfortunately, my photos and scans came out not that great, but I thought I would just show you what some of our labeling looks like. And labeling is obviously one of the thorns in our side. And I thought I would just show you some of what Maryland looks like. So the first one for the Ghost Train Haze, this label isn't too awful. You know, we have a pretty nice cannabinoid and terpene breakdown. So, so this labeling isn't too bad. The cucumber mint tincture that's in the next frame, this one is actually, this contains about the most dosing information of anything that you're going to find in the state of Maryland. Most things are very, very vague. And as you can see here, the suggested use says 1 to 2 servings. But then they actually go down here further and define what they consider a serving. And something that I wanted to point out on here, and when we get to the Q&A, I would really love to hear your comments about this for our fellow pharmacists who are listening. I've been debating this measurement with a lot of our processors around here, the 50 drops per milliliter. I've always been told in pharmacy, we've always done 18 to 20 drops per milliliter. This is such a huge difference. And I realize that, you know, there are things that can contribute to the size of the drop and therefore how many are in the milliliter. But I'm curious to get experience feedback from the rest of you as far as what you're seeing people out or other processors in your state list as the number of drops per milliliter. This, I'm sorry?
So sorry, love. I was going to say, I have to ask, what is like the total milliliter size that that cucumber mint comes in? I don't see total anywhere.
This one,
like I see total cannabinoids, but
here, I believe it, I would have to break out the old calculator, but it was either 30 or 60 milliliters in this one. And interestingly, that I don't think this product is made in Maryland anymore.
Oh, it's 60. So I did,
60,
for those of you interested, I did the 276 divided by 4.6.
So this one, at least my staff has something to go on. And it's tricky for them with tinctures. And we actually did a math session today. And, you know, I'm trying to teach the staff how to calculate tincture dosing. And after 45 minutes, and then I had to leave, they all looked at me and said, Krissy, you got to come back because I think we're more confused than we were before. And they didn't know anything before, but they were still confused afterwards. So it's tricky. This is tricky. And for these folks who are getting paid, you know, $13, $14 an hour, it's a lot to expect them to really understand how to do a lot of these calculations. And this particular label has more information than most do. So at least here they could speak somewhat intelligently about, you know, milligrams per dose. So this last one here, nothing really extraordinary about this. This is a cartridge by GTI, and they do list, you know, a lot of the terpenes on here as well. So it is nice to see that information. A little bit about the program itself. We're called the Natalie LaPrade Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, MMCC, or the Commission for short, and we are overseen by the Department of Health. So the Department of Health really develops, they do everything as far as developing the policies, procedures, all the regulations, all the licensing, inspecting, and the testing, so, or overseeing of the testing. We do have frequent unannounced inspections, and interestingly, I don't know if this has been the case in other states, but overwhelmingly the inspectors are former law enforcement. And so it can sometimes be challenging because they are really coming in to, I feel like they're really coming in to kind of trip you up, and they vary in personality between one to another. So we have one inspector in one store who says, well, you have to do your deliveries this way, and an inspector in another store who says, you don't have to do that. As long as you're doing this, you're okay. So that can create a lot of difficulty when you're trying to develop standard operating procedures across the board and make sure that everybody is operating as the company expects and in compliance. But when the rules are different in different locations, it can obviously get a little bit tricky. These statistics I pulled off of the MMCC website on July the 6th. See, I did my presentation really early to get it done. So I went back today to check some of these numbers. And as of today, our total number of patients is close to 110,000. So within just about 5-6 weeks, we really added a lot of patients. And I believe that has a lot to do with allowing telemedicine, which Maryland did not do until COVID happened. So with the telemedicine being allowed now, patients are getting registered much more easily. Here's a breakdown of our providers as of 7/6. So overwhelmingly physicians, but nurse practitioners, they are a close second, and they really do an amazing job with our patients here in Maryland. I've made several contacts, certifying providers that are nurse practitioners, and I've really found that the bulk of them seem to take a little bit more time with the patients than our traditional physicians do, and that may be just because of their practice, but our nurse practitioners are really doing an amazing job here in Maryland. Our dispensary sales, this is a little misleading. I didn't mean to make that look like it was a range. So this slide just shows the dispensary sales if we want to just look at May of 2020. So May of 2020, we were at 38 million plus. In July of 2020, we were at 41 million. So still doing a fairly nice increase in sales. The operators in the state of Maryland right now, we have 16 cultivators as of April 22nd. There's kind of a long story with those numbers. Processors were at 17, dispensaries 93, and accredited labs, we are at number 6. So for those of you who are in the industry in other states, I don't know what kind of drama you've had to endure with the licensing process. Maryland seemed to set the precedence when we went through our first phase of licensing and we faced challenges. The licenses were challenged, and the program was essentially put on hold. And we were delayed probably a good solid year before things were able to be settled. And this legal battle, unfortunately, continues. It seems to be the norm. If you don't get a license, there's, it seems like people who don't get licenses, it ends up being a lawsuit. So we were trying to award more licenses to increase the diversity in the industry here in Maryland. And that process got challenged. So those licenses that were supposed to be awarded did not get awarded. They were delayed, and then COVID hit. So we have a lot of licenses that are still out there waiting licensees waiting to figure out if they're actually going to be awarded or not. Maryland's COVID response, I really felt they were good to us. They deemed us essential immediately. We had no issues as far as being able to remain open. It was difficult for a while because we were not able to open up our doors to allow patients inside, but we do have curbside service. A few of our dispensaries offer delivery, and then the Oceanside dispensary, where I also work, has a drive-through. So I put a link to a news story in the bottom there of that they did when our dispensary opened with the drive-through, and it's a little comical at first to see our medicine being handed out the window, and it's something that the state would not have allowed if it wasn't for COVID. So we've been told that even after the state of emergency is lifted, we will be able to continue our drive-through service. So we're excited about that. I have to say, it really makes a big difference for the workflow, and it became much more methodical, I think, when we started to do the drive-through as far as workflow and using our cues, and color coding the cues and making sure that everybody knew who was responsible for what, instead of my staff just waiting for people to come walking in. So drive-through service, actually pretty cool. Now, I mentioned labs. Maryland mandates lab testing of all products, and the lab testing will start at the plant level, obviously. So we'll have plant samples done. Samples are done again when we have products from the processor, so it'll get tested again. So products are not released for sale through the state seed to sale tracking system, which is metric. They will not be released until all lab work is done and everything passes. So these are just two examples of some certificates of analysis from one particular lab, Steep Hill. I think they're pretty well known. And we do have other labs, and their lab work will look a little bit different. But I do believe that Maryland was really good with this right from the start, and requiring that these be done for every single product. And we're getting close to the technology where I think just the QR codes and people will be able to link right to the COA for that particular product. So really happy with how Maryland does their lab testing. Now the fun part. So a little bit about some of the background with Maryland. I think Melanie had said at the end of our conference on Saturday, she thought that pharmacists were involved, and I can understand why she thought that, because in a way we are, but in a way we're not. So what does that mean? In the original guidelines, COMAR, our Code of Regulations for Maryland, the regulations stated that dispensaries may appoint a clinical director. So those folks who wanted to get those extra bonus points on their applications mentioned a clinical director in the application, but it wasn't mandatory. So a lot of those companies, even after they won, they cut their clinical director loose. So the application process, that's a little bit of a game, but that's in the topic for another day. Anyway, so now the wording has changed from may assign a clinical director to shall assign a clinical director. And even since I sent this to Melanie, this has changed. The state bumped the requirement for the clinical director to be now in November, I believe. So in November, it will become mandatory, but what exactly does that look like? So they defined who can qualify as a clinical director as anyone who can serve as a certifying provider. So your nurse practitioners, physicians, dentists, podiatrists. However, of course, you cannot be a certifying provider because that would be a conflict of interest. So you can be eligible to serve as a certifying provider, but if you work for a dispensary, you're not allowed to do certifications. You can also be a licensed pharmacist. And then this third point right here, this is the one where we're having a lot of lively discussion. So to serve or to be eligible as a clinical director, an individual must have substantial education, training, and experience in the medical use of cannabis as determined by the commission. So it's going to be up to them to decide if you qualify. And that is, I believe, going to create some issues. I think it does create some opportunities, but I do think it's going to create some issues as well. They have not set forth what they feel is substantial education, training, and experience. So if you question someone on the commission right now, well, what does that mean? They're not going to give you an answer. What they're going to tell you is everybody is reviewed on an individual basis. And I believe I have here, in order to demonstrate the education, training, or experience, these are the items that they are requesting be submitted. Kind of your typical requirements: transcripts, CV, certificates or degrees, any information requested by the commission. So I do have one colleague who is, she's an RN and has her BSN as well, and worked side by side with me with our company pretty much from the beginning. I started a little bit earlier than her. Her position as a nurse was eliminated from our company over a year ago, but she has already been able to be approved as a clinical director. So my understanding is, though, no one else has been approved yet. So where exactly this is going to land, we're not sure. The climate right now is that there are a lot of nursing groups that have joined forces or maybe gone out on their own to create consultant companies, and I believe they will be doing their clinical director duties as a consultant as opposed to an employee of these companies. These companies do not want to pay for a pharmacist. They don't want to pay for nurses either. They're going to want to do it as cheaply as they can. What exactly is a clinical director going to have to do? Let me go to the next screen here, I'm sorry. The clinical director responsibilities, I think this first section here is pretty self-explanatory, everything you would expect us to be doing when we are advising patients. We are also responsible for training our dispensary agents, and also we provide the training when they're onboarding. I provide continuous training, and then there's annual training requirements that are mandated by the commission as well. As far as availability, the clinical director must either be on site or be available via electronic communication that allows the clinical director to answer questions in real time. So in my personal life, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to oversee 5 dispensaries that are open 7 days a week, and how exactly I'm going to make that work. So we're working on some of those things right now. The last thing or a couple things I wanted to mention about clinical director requirements is this reporting requirements that the commission is asking us. And I mention it because everyone I talk to just really has we just kind of chuckle when we read this. They want us to report to them on a quarterly basis the most frequently asked questions by qualifying patients and caregivers and the responses provided to those questions. So it seems like we're probably going to be doing the same report over and over if they want the most frequently asked questions. So I think that this is kind of a silly requirement, but here it is. As far as training requirements for a clinical director, we're required to complete at least 1 commission-approved training course each year. I've already submitted the conference from over the weekend, and I've heard nothing back yet, but I have no doubt that that this course will be accepted. Some additional resources. Here's the website for the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission for the entire set of regulations. I don't know if anyone would want to suffer through that, but there they are. And some updates are listed here. And I just had to show this picture. I think this picture is really cool. Crab cakes and cannabis, that's what Maryland does. So this is one of our vendor t-shirts has this design. We think it's pretty cute. So I think I probably went through that fairly quickly. So hopefully we have some time for questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Krissy. That was very informative and really just goes to show you how vague some of these commission-related rules can be.
You know, absolutely, Melanie. And one thing I didn't really delve into is I don't know if any of my fellow pharmacists from Maryland are on this. I don't see any of their names, but there's really only about 3 or 4 that I'm aware of in the state of Maryland, and we all have such a different role based on our company. So, you know, one pharmacist, she actually owns her dispensary, so her role is going to be very different. For me, I work for a multi-state operator. I've been with the company since I would say stage 0 in Maryland, and I oversee multiple dispensaries, and I still have involvement with the grow and the processor. So I kind of have my hands in a little bit of everything. Where I lose out, though, is really having that a lot of patient engagement. I have a lot, but I don't see the same patients over and over again because I'm not in the same dispensary. So I lose a little bit of that continuity and some of that follow-up. So that is one thing that I sort of miss in my role. And it makes me train my staff even more obsessively because I can't be there all the time. So I want to make sure that you know, that they're treating the patients, giving the patients the best advice that they possibly can.
I love it. And it just goes to show, you know, whatever setting a pharmacist is in, you got to wear a lot of hats and you got to be able to know where to look up those questions and those answers and
Yes.
really be a resource, and more than just, you know, providing drug therapy information, but, you know, a lot of times it has to deal with, you know, where can I get certified and things along those lines. So you're doing a fabulous job.
It's been quite an adventure. I feel incredibly fortunate. It was a big risk that I took because I as I had mentioned earlier, as far as pharmacy goes, it was like pharmacy nirvana. I had an independent that was close to my home. We were closed at 7 p.m. and worked 9 to 1 on Saturday and closed on Sunday. It doesn't get any better than that, right?
That's right.
And the more that I started to learn about the industry and cannabis, and in particular the opioid situation, because my pharmacy, no different than anyone else's, was really feeling the impact of the opioid crisis. And when you're filling those prescriptions and you're handing them over the counter, it's like this moral dilemma every time. You don't know what's going to happen to those pills or to that patient once they leave the store. So learning about how cannabis can really help with pain and potentially then with opioid use and addiction, after self-study and being involved in the licensing process for about a year, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to get out of the pharmacy. So I made a leap of faith, and I actually worked pro bono for about 6 months. It was incredibly frightening. I went from a pharmacist salary down to 0, and just crossed my fingers that I was doing the right thing. And I don't have any regrets. It hasn't turned out to be a windfall financially by any stretch. However, being able to do what I do, and as a pharmacist without the confines of our traditional pharmacy, has just been, I think, an opportunity of a lifetime.
I always think that, cannabis had to be illegal for a reason, and maybe it's that pharmacists can use it as a backboard to get that, provider status. We do have some questions in the chat, so I'll kind of read some. I had a question about one of the labels you presented, just with the idea of, because you have so many different manufacturers, and I know you are technically vertically integrated, but your dispensary can have other products, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you know, and this might be like a state requirement, but like for your vaporizers, are they all extracted using the same method? Like, is it all CO2, or you have all different?
It's completely up to the company. The vast majority are distillate.
Yeah.
Verano does ethanol distillation. We do the GTI, which I know GTI is a big multi-state operator, so some of you may be familiar. GTI does CO2, but it's kind of, it's both, but I think most do distillate, and some do strain specific distillate, and then some do just kind of fake, where they reinfuse everything to be whatever they want it to be.
Absolutely. Let's see. Would you mind going back to the previous slide for the resources? We'll just kind of leave it on there for a moment. And then while we're talking about that, what advice would you give a pharmacist in retail who's trying to break into the cannabinoid industry?
I don't know if it's specifically in Maryland or in another state. If you're listening to this today, you are on the right track. Learning and networking, you really just need to learn what your state is all about. I can tell you that the landscape on the East Coast, I think, is vastly different than the landscape on the West Coast. I haven't practiced on the West Coast, but from my understanding of it, the East Coast has gotten to be much more regulated. So we're rolling out programs with regulations instead of rolling out a program and then going back and trying to regulate later. So really just learn your state regulations. If you are in a medical state that actually treats it medicinally and hopefully isn't just waiting to flip the switch to rec. Not that I'm saying that that's necessarily an awful thing, but if pharmacists or any healthcare provider has a role in your state, just learn everything you can about the laws. Follow Indeed. It's something as simple as Indeed. Just start getting notifications and just start doing some research. There's a lot of local networking groups. Women Grow was a big networking group around here for a while. We have a spin-off group here in Maryland called Spark, and they do a lot of, it's a social, but kind of education and also networking things. So people will go and exchange cards and resumes and things like that. So that would be my advice. Learn as much as you can, get any certificates that you can. This one is fabulous. I can't wait. And
wait till you see the calculation piece. So
but yeah, I think this is amazing, and I can't wait to delve into it a little bit more. But my email address, if I didn't put it on here, I'll make sure that you all get it. Please don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions.
Yeah, Krissy, a couple more while I have you on here.
Yeah.
Maryland actually has that master's program.
Yes.
Yeah. Any collaboration, any interest? Like what is your experience now that you're in the industry, in the area?
So this has been kind of an interesting evolution as well. So when we first started in the state of Maryland, Americans for Safe Access partnered with the University of Maryland to do online training. So if anyone has seen the Americans for Safe Access PFC, Patient Focused Certification Training, Americans for Safe Access would do that training in person, and obviously they needed to move it to an online platform. So University of Maryland took that on, and that lasted all of about 3 weeks. I was pretty involved in that. I was on a news story that came out, and everyone's all excited. Well, University of Maryland's doing this. 3 weeks later, shut down. 2 years after that, all of a sudden we have a master's program there. So I don't know how they managed to do that so fast, to develop that master's program when their legal team completely shut down even just having a continuing education platform. So as far as the program goes, though, I have not signed up for it. There are some, I do have some colleagues who are signed up taking it. I've been skeptical just because of looking at the curriculum and some of the teaching, some of the professors and those who are teaching. So we'll see. I'm anxious to get feedback from my colleagues who are taking it. It'll be it's too soon to say, I guess, is really my answer, what that's really going to look like. And I do feel like the people who are going to be coming out of that are going to be the ones who are trying to snatch up those clinical director positions. And you did not have to have a healthcare degree to sign up for this master's program. You could go in with an English degree. So
we call it humanities, or no, what is it? Liberal arts.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And there's some political, questions and connections there that make some of us kind of, scratch our heads. But so we'll see.
Awesome. And then one more. Does Maryland specifically have like a social equity component to their program? No.
Well. So this is where all of the lawsuits really have begun, because the original intent of the licensing was to take diversity into account so that the licensing represented the diversity that the state represents. And when all was said and done, there were a few things that happened at the very end of the licensing that may not have been in bad faith, but had a questionable appearance to it. And what ended up happening was a couple of our minority groups got pushed out, even though they had scored within the top 15. So needless to say, lawsuits were started, and a diversity study was mandated by the governor. When the diversity study came back and said, oh yeah, you guys didn't do a very good job of this, then they decided to award some additional licenses, including to those who got bumped from the original round. And then there was a program to bring in, I think, 4 more cultivation licenses, and those are now being challenged legally. So the answer is they're trying, I think, to make our program representative of the diversity that are of our state. They have not done a very good job so far.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time. For those of you that were able to join us live, thank you as well. And then we will be recording this and posting it to our website as well as our YouTube page. So you're not done with Krissy yet. But Krissy, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
Not really. Again, I want to say that I was so humbled to be in the company of such amazing minds over the weekend. And, it kind of makes you realize how much you don't know and how much we all don't know. Just such amazing information. And I really can't imagine going back to the bench. I hope I never have to. Sorry, but I really can't complain. It's been so much fun. It's been very eye-opening. I felt like I was living a little bit in a bubble as a pharmacist, and really had to learn a lot on my own, and was given a lot of flexibility. Like with my company, I like to tell people, I don't think they know what to do with a pharmacist. No one's done this job before. They don't have any other pharmacists. They've never had a clinical director. So they have been sort of letting me forge my own path. And while that is, it's wonderful to do, and it's an amazing challenge, it's difficult. And like everything else in this industry, you have to pivot on a dime constantly. So with the different dispensaries that I oversee, it's very hard for me to start a project and finish it because I'm, getting pulled in a lot of different directions. But I love my staff. I love the patients. Yeah, it's been great.
I love it. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And I see some people that are not in the United States. So if you are in your daytime morning time, yes. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and evening. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to present.
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
To find out the answer to that question and more, visit our website at cannabispharmacist.org.